With the realignment potentially, do you think it's possible to do a bubble though, full league? I know we looked at hockey, it was the playoffs, the bubble worked perfectly. Baseball, it worked once they finally started paying attention to the rules. But do you think it's possible with that many teams in it to even do it and make it functional?
I don't think so. I think it worked in the playoffs because that's what it was. It was the playoffs. And even though the two teams that were left standing at the end were in the bubble for 2.5, 3 months almost, that was a major commitment by the player and the staffs and the coaches. And it costs a lot of money to be able to do that properly. And hats off to everybody for pulling it off. But I just can't see it working in the regular season. It's too long a time. There's not that carrot at the end. I'll be away from my family for 2 months. I'll tough it out, but I'm doing it because I have a shot, maybe my only shot at winning a Stanley Cup. To do that in the regular season and be away from your families or, for extended periods, I think it would be very difficult. But again, I don't want to speculate because Commissioner Bettman has said all along, everything's on the table. And by being that way, by the partnership between the Players Association and the league last season when we were in the pause and came out of the pause, what they agreed on to do, you're going to need that again here. And I just can't see the players signing off on doing that.
Yeah, I would agree that too.
I mean, that commitment was crazy, but you look back at it separates hockey from other sports where we play to win. I know Pasternak, I'm pretty sure he said, I'll sleep on a cot. He doesn't care where he sleeps. He wants to play. You look at other sports, baseball, they were very lackadaisical with following the rules because they cared more about at times going out and gambling and going out to eat rather than the sport. And for hockey, it seems like, no, we're here to do one thing and that's to win. I mean, basketball, you had the issues too with the bubble, people bringing in people that weren't allowed, all that stuff. And then it comes back to you care more about winning or the other stuff. And for hockey, it seems like it was all about winning. But I agree with you too. There's too many teams and too much spread, geographically for a bubble to work.
Yeah, definitely. And, when it comes to the Rangers next season, though, if bubble or not, however they wind up playing, we're hoping there's a full season and the Rangers now have an exciting young team. So do you think that they are contenders or pretenders when it comes to just making the postseason? Forget the whole cup run because that's, I think, a couple of years away still.
All right. So you're not saying Stanley Cup contender. You're just saying, can they be a playoff contender?
Yep.
Or are they pretenders? I'll start with the second part. I don't think they can be pretenders. To me, a pretender is a team that's further along in the process where you have higher expectations for them. So I don't think the Rangers could even fall in that category. Let's say they take a step back this season. They don't make the playoffs and kids struggle. It takes a while. The chemistry doesn't work. Well, whatever the situation ends up to be. I still don't think that they fall into a pretender category because they're really still just gelling and coming together. And they rely on so many young players that you just don't know. It's got to come together. There's so many things that have to go right for the New York Rangers to realistically raise those expectations where you'd say, well, they should be in the play. They should be in the playoffs. Well, I don't know that they should be in the playoffs, but that leads to the first part of your questions. Do I think that they'd be a contender for the playoffs? I think absolutely. And I think they showed that last year, certainly in the second half before the season was paused March 12th. I think for sure that they showed that. They have two dynamic forwards in Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. That is a tremendous building block right there. And the fact that they don't even play on the same line. Now you're really spreading out the wealth there. So now you're looking at not just a super top line. It's kind of like Edmonton when they had Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. A heck of a line. It was difficult to stop them, and you couldn't completely shut them down. But you would focus your attention, your best defensive forwards, your top defensive pairing. You knew who you had to stop. And then, you know what? Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and the rest of you come beat us. And it didn't work. Now, Edmonton is, I think, better suited now as they've added this offseason and even last season when they, Connor McDavid was on one line, Leon Draisaitl was on another line. They spread the wealth. Well, that's what I think the Rangers do really well here. And they have, some good secondary components. But to really become a playoff team, you need the young kids to step up and take them over the hump. I think you kind of know what you're going to get from Panarin. You kind of know what you're going to get from Mika. You know what you'll get from Chris Kreider. I think you know what you get from your bottom six guys. But do you know what you're going to get from Philip Hedl?
Yep.
I absolutely believe he's got to be a top six guy this year. He's been, kind of fits and starts building towards that. He's been in the league a few years now. I think he needs to be a top 6 guy. If he isn't, it doesn't mean he's a bust or anything like that. Everybody wants to label guys. He's still a kid. But I'd have some concerns if I'm Jeff Gordon and John Davidson and David Quinn. If Heedle doesn't take a big step forward this year. But Heedle, Lafreniere, what are you going to get from him, realistically this season? Is Kravtsov going to come over and play? He's playing very well in the KHL, got off to a good start. Is he going to be a contributor? You don't know. And those are the guys I think that are going to make the difference, at least as forwards. They're going to make the difference and carry them, into being a playoff team or not. The other part of it is they got to play better team defense. And boy, that's going to be tough to do when you lost your best and most reliable defensive forward in Jesper Fast. Yep. I think that was a really big blow. I guess I understand reasons behind it and all, but you also lost Marc Staal. And I know Ranger fans, they've been down on him for years. It's mainly the contract. Like if he was Marc Staal making $3 million a year, $2.5 million a year, you'd be like, wow, kills penalties.
You could tolerate it.
He stabilizes the left side. He's a tremendous help to the young defensemen that he played with. But it was the contract, which is the reason why he was traded as well. But now you're without him as well. So that you already had a shaky defense. And now, you've lost Fast, you've lost Staal. Going to be a heck of a lot of pressure, on the 2 young goalies, which I think they're fine in goal. And I think they did the right thing in clearing things up there. So I've talked my way around into this huge circle of not answering your question about if they're a contender or not, because there are all these things that factor into it. But I will say they won't be a pretender. Even if they don't make the playoffs, it doesn't mean they're a pretender. I think they are a playoff contender, though, but they really need to make a significant step forward, which I think we saw, in the Stanley Cup qualifiers. You could see how Carolina they've already taken the steps that the Rangers are just taking right now. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that playoff experience was fantastic for the younger players and for the coach as well, and for the evaluation process. Yes. In short, I do think that they are a contender and they can make the playoffs this season.
That's not good for my Islanders. But one more point on the Rangers.
I think the Islanders are in good shape too.
They should be good, but the more the Rangers get there off, the problem is the defense, and that's my next question for you is, statistically speaking, what does Jack Johnson bring to this defensive group? I know Marc Staal left, and maybe Jack Johnson can be that leader for those young guys, but statistically, I feel like with Marc Staal too, as he got to the end of his Ranger tenure, he was making silly mistakes that you don't want your young players, watching and learning from. What does Jack Johnson bring to this team?
Yeah, I was really surprised by that signing. I mean, I guess I understood bringing in another veteran guy, which I think they needed to do, because really, your most senior guy now is Brendan Smith, who's not the most reliable. Though I will say, I thought he had a pretty good year last year, both at forward and on defense. Again, is he worth the contract that he makes? That's up for debate. But and did he struggle for sure before that? Yes. But even with the year he had last year, Brendan Smith, that's your most senior guy, on your defense now. So I understood that they were going to bring somebody else in because as well as Fox and Lindgren played last year, as the huge step forward that Tony DeAngelo took last year. And, if a Hayek or a Miller, one of those young defensemen is able to grab a role this season, great. But, how many young guys did I just name there? It's not sustainable in a long season to play the type defense you need to play with that many young kids there. So it circles back to your question, Jack Johnson, I know he fits in, price wise and everything, salary cap wise, it's a fit. He's a great guy. he's one of those great in the locker room guys. His teammates love him. And I think he does. I think he can help the young guys. I think he can provide a lot of advice, and he's a smart, good leader. I'm just not sure on the ice. I think it's a major step back going from Marc Staal to Johnson. But again, I think their hope is that he plays limited minutes on the third line, on the third pairing, and maybe they hope for a little lightning in the bottle that maybe halfway through the season, a Hayek can take that spot or at least rotate in, or Keandre Miller, who's a much more dynamic player than what Hayek is projected to be. So, yeah, I guess I see the reasoning behind it. There are probably some other veteran defensemen out there that you could have got for similar money and might have been, might have been produced better results on the ice. But, I think that's the reasoning behind, Jack Johnson coming to the Rangers.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that they did need a veteran presence. How much of a veteran necessarily, that's up to the GM. And he decided that Jack Johnson fit that mold. And with the contender or pretender answer, you kind of segued this next one about the youngsters needing to step up. And prior to the NHL draft, when the Rangers selected Alexei Lafreniere first overall, Craig Button said on TSN that he projects Alexei Lafreniere to have 60-plus points next season, which whenever I hear that, I get a little bit, anxious. I'm like, that's a lot of pressure on a young kid, but he is the first overall pick. So do you think that, he's probably going to start on the third line, that's a likely number for him to hit, or should we expect a little bit lower?
Yeah, and again, that's under an assumption of an 82-game season as well. I mean, here are the things that make you think that he's got a shot. Again, we'll use 60 points as just a round number, but that make you think that he's got a shot at getting there. I think the Rangers are going to give him every opportunity to be a top 6 guy. I don't think they'll force it on him if he's not ready. Like you said, maybe he starts third line, but then they move him up, as he, gains confidence and, just fits into the league and everything. He's still a kid. Yeah. But he's also physically very mature. This isn't bringing your average 18, 19-year-old in there. He is a very physically mature kid, which, of course, is part of his dynamic. He's a dynamic player. And he plays an NHL-style game, which I love. He's not on the periphery. He's not, a lot of guys in the QMJHL, put up these 100, 120, 140 point seasons, and look at me, the guy's 5'6", 160 pounds, but they're putting up these huge numbers because it's that type, league, with, wide open offensively and what have you. But Lafreniere put up these great numbers while playing an NHL type game. He is physical. He drives the net. He puts the pressure on defensemen. Gets in on the forecheck. Does a lot of the things that you like that you need to succeed in the National Hockey League. So that's kind of reason number 2 why I think he's going to have success this year. But it kind of two-way, talking about his physical maturity. You compare him to a kid like Jack Hughes last year. Jack Hughes may not, we'll see in another 10, 12 years, may have the better career than Alexei Lafreniere or Capo Caco or whatever. But those two guys were more into their men's mold body than Jack. Like, you saw Jack out there and you could see the skill and the vision and the talent that he has. But you also saw a kid that looked like a kid. He's going to build up and he's physically going to, grow into his body. Maybe it'll be more so this year. Maybe it's another year down the road. Lafreniere is well ahead of that curve, just using Jack Hughes as an example. And that's why you really feel that, he can hit the ground running this year. He's not a number 1 overall pick where you say, well, let's give him a couple years. Yeah. Yes, let's give him a couple years to be a dominant player. But I think he can make an impact this year.